Welcome to the House of A Store podcast.
Keep going.
Okay, in this episode, we'll be discussing The Terminator. I'm your host, William. Join me, will be Derek.
Pull out Kyle.
And Sean.
Hello.
So, The Terminator from 1984, the James Cameron directed, Arnold Schwarzenegger starring film that started the story about robots sent back in time to kill people.
Yeah.
And a dude got sent back too.
So we were talking about, the whole plot of this film is Schwarzenegger gets sent back in time to kill the mother of basically the savior of the human race in the future.
Yeah.
So Derek said he wished it just ended with him grabbing the Terminator coming in and grabbing Kyle Reese off top of Sarah Connor, telling him to pull out. It's funny because when I was watching this film too, I was thinking, it would be great if it would be terrible if the reveal was that that basically Kyle Reese made the Terminator as his wingman and just made up this entire story to go back in time to bone Sarah Connor.
I hate John Connor.
Yeah, so I guess
He's like, I've got to protect you.
Full spoilers throughout.
Yeah,
So
that's not what happened.
So here's what's funny though, like I said, full spoilers. Here'd be really funny. So say that the story isn't that the Terminator is trying to kill Sarah Connor. It's that the Terminator is trying to make Kyle Reese impotent.
Yeah, kicking him in the nuts. And he turns the microwave on, holds him there. He's like, no. Yeah.
So he gives him
Tidy whities. You need to wear these.
Like, let's go even more controversial. He just gives him a bunch of vaccines so that when John Connor's born, he'll have.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Okay.
Real quick, the one thing that doesn't make sense about this movie, and maybe later in installments can explain it, but I guess John Connor has to know that the guy he sends back in time is actually his father.
Yeah, I think because that's why he gives him the photo of her also. I think he sets that up.
What doesn't make sense about that is
Time loop.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. Yeah,
Because,
and I don't think they ever explain it.
Because at one point there would have to be a John Connor that was born not of him but somebody else, and so I was like, wait a minute.
I mean, I guess in theory, maybe there could be something weird where at that point, freaking somebody came from an alternate reality. You know what I mean? Like to John Connor in the future, they came from alternate reality. It was like, hey, we're just sending word that, that in, I don't know, our reality, I don't know how that would even work. Yeah. Like there's no way even like
that.
But I think it kind of makes it interesting because you leave the theater like, oh, wow. But
So I guess.
The first time the movie ended, everybody's like, oh, wow.
This was the first, I think, big sci-fi film that really made time travel interesting as far as reflect. You know what I mean? Like, before this, I can't think of any that did anything other than went into the future or went into the past.
Yeah, back.
You know what I mean? Like I can't really Back to the Future was what, 85?
Yeah.
And that was like another
similar plot.
a huge time travel film. But I think that's what the time travel alone just makes us so interesting.
See, the difference in say Back to the Future and Terminator is the events of Back to the Future of time travel never occurred. Like Marty is in the present, all these things are pretty much there, as opposed to Terminator gets into the area of the events of the movie had to happen. Like what, I don't know. I guess so. Sarah Connor is at the club that night when Kyle Reese comes and saves her from the Terminator. Maybe she would have just brought some dude home. And that's who John Connor's parents were, or dad was.
Maybe it's like a prophetic or a more I don't want to say religious isn't the right word.
It's fated to happen.
Yeah, like that her child is the savior, and no matter who she has sex with, it's gonna be the savior, even if he's not the same exact person or looks exactly the same. Maybe that's it.
So then the even tragic thing is if John Connor's older than Kyle Reese, he's like, "You're my dad. Son, let's go on a son and son trip." So like you said, we've been spoiling it throughout. So the basic premise of the Terminator from 1984 is that a robotic Terminator played by Arnold Schwarzenegger is sent back in time to kill Sarah Connor because her son John Connor leads the human resistance in the future after machines turn against humans, and he's able to get them on the verge of being able to possibly defeat the machines. So they use time travel to send a robot back to kill his mother so he's never born and doesn't rally people and save humanity.
Yeah. Which I guess maybe it's one of those things where, like, maybe you are more correct because it didn't matter who the dad was. It just mattered who the mom was. So,
yeah.
Because, like, theoretically, they could have just...
Because men are so unimportant.
Well, they could have just... Like, they could have just sent him back to kill every man in that area or whatever, you know, and it...
Well, that'd be a lot more difficult.
Or you could just kill the woman.
Yeah. No, I was thinking just...
She's got the eggs.
Why was only one Terminator sent back?
Well, I think he said they only had the...
They blew up the... They sent one back. They infiltrated the place. They sent him back, and then they blew it up.
Yeah, so they were able to send one back. And then he went through and they destroyed it so that there was no coming back or no more until they create a new machine a little bit later.
Yeah.
So real quick, too, the new Terminator films are going to disregard everything past 2 because James Cameron wasn't involved in those.
I mean, makes sense. I mean, those continuities all went off in all these different directions.
I mean, it's hard, but also, too, it's like, man... I don't know. Hopefully it also stands alone as well because it has to stand alone because... You know, I don't want to say kids these days, but audiences these days, they're not, you know, they know there's been 15 Transformers, Terminator films. Like, you know, take my parents like, well, okay, you remember the first and second one, disregard the third one and the fourth one. Like, it has to be so standalone and just say, okay, well, we can kind of fudge the rest of them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because, you know, I know there was more mixed opinions, but the new Halloween movie mostly didn't require you to know. I mean, it disregarded all the sequels, really.
Yeah.
So I think you need a movie that you can go in and it delivers a self-contained, you know, entertaining, thrilling entry in that genre. In addition to being tied into the lore of prequel, sequel.
It's just a little bit, it could be a little bit harder with this series because Halloween's just somebody goes, kills, and there's one timeline. You can just disregard the others.
Yeah.
This is literally different timelines. You know what I mean? And like, you have to, no matter what happens in this film, they have to catch people up to speed. Just like this film does, like as far as the reality of the world.
I guess that really that you could say, since Terminator involves time travel to the extent it does, the other things could have happened as just variants, and this is just something branches and changes.
This is their Days of Future Past. All right, so this is going to be the course correction. And
so you're saying that Bryan Singer's going to direct it?
No, he would not be anywhere near it.
The new one's directed by Tim Miller, who did the first Deadpool.
Yeah,
so X-Men connection.
Yeah, so the first
X-Men minute.
Yeah. So the Terminator film. So something that was kind of striking to me, the two things that did not realize. So I had seen this movie a ton of times, but it was always on cable.
Yeah, me
so
too.
In the 90s, because Terminator 2 was huge. Yeah. You know, like a lot of impact. It was very popular.
That's the one I've seen the most. I think that's the most.
I get them confused.
So I think what happened. So Terminator made decent money. The Terminator made, you know, more than its budget by, you know, became a successful film.
It was like made for $1.6 million and made almost 80 at the time.
Yeah, so
not
it was
just for inflation or anything.
So it was a big success. It got James Cameron Aliens. Because of the success of the Terminator, he was able to get the Aliens franchise and to take that in a different direction. And then he did The Abyss and True Lies and Terminator 2 and Titanic. So, and then Avatar. So somebody that's made movies that made a ton of money.
Yeah,
but the first
is like, I think he may actually be involved in time travel because he somehow knows how to always make the biggest box office.
Yeah,
it's like a movie about blue aliens that essentially recaps the plot of Fern Gully or Dances with Wolves is going to be the highest grossing movie of all time.
And before that, a movie about the largest boat, in 1912 that hits an iceberg and goes under. Like
he also
that's the highest grossing film of like an event
he
that
directed
happened 7 years.
Not only that, it was a 3-hour long movie.
90 years prior.
He directed the original Aquaman film starring Vincent Chase. That was a plot line from Entourage season 2. But yeah, so the Terminator. So the point I was making was, I had seen this on cable dozens of times, seen it from beginning to end on cable at least a handful of times. Terminator 2 I saw a lot more because as a kid I was obsessed with dirt bikes. So.
Well, I think too though, like Terminator 2 is
it's
just
glossy, it's higher budget.
Yeah,
Schwarzenegger's the good guy, so
it's more fun.
Kid, I mean, it's very much like this. 2 is the film kids would love, and
even though
that we were obviously marketed because I remember having some of the Terminator action figures.
Yeah, I did too.
And playing with
but
playing Terminator versus RoboCop on Sega or whatever.
The thing that I remember with the Terminator, the original one, is seeing it on cable. So when you rewatch it, isn't like from. I think this is the first time I've watched it, the rated R version from beginning to end. Because, like I said, I'd always just watched it on cable, and then I've owned copies of Terminator 2 in different formats and watched that a bunch. So when rewatching it, it's like, oh, so I guess the language, there's a little bit of language in it that you wouldn't have gotten in the original. And you see Arnold's dong, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, you
Linda
see
Hamilton's
boobs. Yeah.
So there's a slight bit of nudity.
Yeah.
But so what Williams is saying, 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
Good night, everybody.
Well, I was telling William before the podcast, and maybe you're in the room. I don't know if I've ever actually watched the original Terminator all the way through. Because for me, because this came out in the 84, so T2 came out in 91. So I've always watched
when you were like a hardy 1-year-old child.
But by the time I got old enough to really remember stuff, it was on TV.
It was big through the 90s.
And I remember one time you'd bought it was when the Xbox 360 first came out, and you had surround sound system on the HD TV.
Yeah,
and that was the first one we watched, and we blew my dad out of when he turns the volume up, so that blows him out of the chair. But I remember that that was the movie you went and bought because I think you were at Circuit City.
It's like dun 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 dun.
So, and then you had the really memorable thing where it's like Linda Hamilton sitting at the fence and she's like screaming and the world's blown up.
Well, it's just like.
But whereas this one
it's more subdued. It's lower budget.
I enjoy it more though because this one fits more in with what we talk about, which it's more of a stalker horror movie.
It's shorter too by a good amount, right?
Well, and you don't have as much of the lore. So one thing that
but I think that's kind of what makes it a little more fun too, because you just get little tidbits and you get to see the past world, but you don't know.
So I think that part of it to me is the first two movies I really like, and I've watched the first one I've watched on cable, but the second one I loved, in that era and watched it a bunch. Yeah. The sequels kind of all diminishing returns because I don't know. I saw the third one, the one that was like Nick Stahl and
which is funny because they never ever have gotten the John Connor character correct. Like they've never picked an actor I was like, that's John Connor.
I think they should just bring back Edward Furlong.
Even then, they just never really.
You know what? You know who looks enough like Edward Furlong to play him as an adult now? Norman Reedus.
Yeah, now Norman Reedus could probably be believable.
Is like the disgruntled, reluctant hero type.
Yeah. Who's also the dad from Back to the Future?
Oh, Crispin Glover.
Let's get Crispin Glover.
I was watching some old interviews he used to do on Leno, and he was.
So before we jump into it, what did you see part 3, Derek?
Yeah.
What did you guys think of part 3?
I think when I was younger, I liked it. Yeah. But that was one of those movies that has came on FX ad nauseum for over a decade. So I do not care for that movie because for one, again, John Connor had some wimpy little dude. They didn't have the correct people in it because I guess to me it's like
the direction they went did not.
They didn't have Linda Hamilton in it. They killed her character with cancer or something, and then
oh yeah, I forgot that.
And then
I've got breast cancer.
Yeah, I just didn't. I like I said, it was kind of like a Crystal Skull. I liked it when I first watched
the Kingdom of the Crystal
and
Skull.
then on reflection, you're like, no, it's not very.
What about you, William?
So I remember at the time seeing it in theaters. I think we maybe saw it with my dad.
Yeah, we all went.
So.
Because the Terminators were movies we always went and watched.
So I thought it was an enjoyable enough action film at the time, but I don't think it stands up very well. And the direction it sent the franchise in is this isn't really satisfying.
Yeah.
Because you have Sarah Connor being such a badass in Terminator 2, and then John Connor being under her wing and being taught, and then he's just kind of this nerdy dude that gets caught in a cage at a vet's office and stuff. So it just didn't really seem to me like a great continuation of so if point A is Terminator 2, this did not seem like what point B would actually be.
Yeah.
And then I felt like just from that point forward, James Cameron not really being involved in it, that they just kind of took it in directions that didn't really further.
Even though 3 is not great, I still feel like that is probably if you just want to, if you're hey, I just want to see more Terminator and I haven't seen one, watch 3 because
Arnold Schwarzenegger's good in it.
Yeah, 3 that came out when we were in high school, right? I feel like I specifically remember a friend of mine.
It was 03 or 04.
We were very excited to see it just because we watched Terminator 2 over and over before that came out.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed it in theaters just because it was Schwarzenegger again. Did you find out what year? Probably I think 03.
It was 2003.
Yeah,
Terminator 3:
right.
Rise of the Machines.
Yeah, and I liked the coffin scene That was super fun, and I love the semi truck when he's hanging off the fire truck or whatever. He's hanging off the end of it. Like, I love that. I think those two scenes are great action scenes.
Yeah,
they may not be well constructed. I have not seen them much at all. Like, I've only turned it on TV briefly because
but it's something you remember
because the story. Yeah, the story was okay enough to see. Like, whatever, Terminator's back. I was glad to see Schwarzenegger. I didn't walk out of the theater mad or anything. I was like, okay, cool, whatever. Moving on, next movie. And then Salvation, you guys didn't see that?
I've not watched any on purpose since.
I have seen bits and pieces of it because it's one that has Sam,
Christian Bale, and
the dude from Avatar.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Avatar.
I guess.
Oh, Sam Worthington. Yeah. Sam Worthington, Christian Bale. Oh, Anton Yelchin was in it.
Yeah, that's right. He plays like a younger kid getting chased and stuff.
Helena Bonham Carter, Bryce Dallas Howard.
She's a Common. Like, I remember specific
Michael
scenes
Ironside.
I remember liking it okay in theaters.
The biggest thing I remember about that, so it came out in 2009. I think that was the same year that Transformers 2 came out. Mm-hmm. And Mick G and Michael Bay were threatening to have a literal dick measuring contest because they're clashing over. We both have big robot movies this summer. And then Transformers 2 made way more than Terminator Salvation. Yeah. But
Salvation 2, I think I remember hearing that John Connor was supposed to be kind of a character in the background, and you would hear him on the radio and stuff, and he maybe just would come in at the end or a little bit, but Christian Bale wanted him to be more of the forefront character, and then he played him in it. It wasn't awful, but it's like now that they are essentially erasing those films, it's not. I almost feel like, okay, just forget about it. But it was a very like yellow film. There was definitely some cool scenes in there. And yeah, again, I was excited to see that because I'm like, I hope they do it right. Even though Schwarzenegger isn't a big part, like I think at the end he shows up as a really heavily CGI.
Well, because Sam Worthington, if I remember correctly, spoiler for Salvation, I think I have seen it because he is a Terminator himself that thinks he's a human.
Yes, yeah, that was a pretty cool element.
And then he's at the factory and there's like Arnold's.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I have seen it. I just forgot it.
Yeah.
And then, like the one that they keep showing on FX now is, I guess, the most recent
Genesis,
one, which I've not watched.
It has Jason Clarke and
Emilia Clarke.
Yeah, or is it Jason Clarke?
What's her name from Game of Thrones? That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, Emilia Clarke, Daenerys.
But they always show that on, I think, FX a lot. I have not watched. It's always on at the gym, and I'll see like the same intro part where it just kind of redoes the Terminator 1 beginning. And then it's
Emilia Clarke and Jason Clarke, and both of their last names are Clarke, but they're not related.
Jason Clarke is not somebody who.
And J.K. Simmons. That was a movie where they spoiled the movie's big twist in all the marketing materials.
Yeah,
I forgot what the big twist was.
That John Connor was a Terminator robot thing.
Oh, I don't even remember that. And I watched that film again. That one I didn't go to see because of the reviews and everything, and I was busy at the time. But I watched that whenever it came. It was on some service for free. It popped up or something, maybe HBO. And I was more disappointed in that than I was Salvation or 3. It felt so just trying to recreate 2, and it failed on a lot of arms. And honestly, Emilia Clarke, I think she's great in Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Don't think she was good in this. And I don't think it was all her fault at all.
I think she's a little bit miscast for Sarah Connor.
Yeah.
But like it's just one of those things where. So going back to the original Terminator, I don't think that James Cameron thought in 1984 when this movie came out that it would be the cornerstone of a decades spanning franchise that's grossed billions of dollars worldwide. I mean, everybody could hope that something they would make have a lasting impact and be popular, but what he was making is more of a contained, kind of high concept, like horror thriller movie. It's not really. I mean, like talk about like if it's a horror or not. I guess you could argue it is. Like
I think
the sequels definitely are. Terminator 2 definitely isn't. But
one thing that I really
Terminator 2 definitely has some horror scenes in it. Like whenever she's trying to escape and everything like that, it has some moments in there.
Yeah, and there's some very James Cameron-esque moments.
It's action sci-fi, but sci-fi horror action.
But one scene that was in this, that was in Aliens, almost identical. Was this is full spoilers. At the very end, Sarah Connor's crushing the Terminator, and he's like through a fence. And his arm reaches through, and it's like right next to her face, and and it's like, that's the exact same from Aliens. But I don't know, like what I really like is, and this movie effectively does like the stalking stuff, because you have one character that doesn't really understand it, And I do kind of like that. And again, like I probably have never really watched this all the way through at the beginning. I do like that. Like he goes back in time. He just has a name. He doesn't know the full name. He just knows it's Sarah Connor. So he goes in the phone book and just starts murdering Sarah Connors. Now, what I like that they kind of actually did this because it's taking place in California. And California in the 70s and 80s was just like a minefield of just serial killers. So they took it from a serial killer perspective.
Yeah. Which I thought what you would do.
Yeah, which I thought was really interesting.
You wouldn't jump to being a robot.
Yeah, because you have like these just regular women that have no connections whatsoever, other than the name. So I thought that was really cool because it's like you could kind of see that being like a real news story, and people are like, oh yeah, whatever.
Well, it's funny too. So in 1984, they had no concept that we would have, smartphones in our pocket that have access to an entire database of every information available, of an interconnected, system where you can wirelessly get whatever information you need. So in the 80s, that's something that they may have thought about, in very vague terms, but not any idea of what form that would ultimately take. Like on Star Trek, they had I forget what they're called, the transponders or whatever. So you had stuff in some sci-fi that's kind of like that. But it's just funny to me when the Terminator comes back, he just has the self-contained database only in his brain. It's not connected to any outside source because he's back in time.
Yeah, and one thing that I like about though, the way they kind of save themselves from the smartphone technology is the fact that the nuclear war happened and wiped everything out. So even if that stuff existed, anything at all that because there was no Facebook in that.
But it's just funny that they would have had to code him with the knowledge that these things called phone books existed in the 80s. And these are paper, creations that you can find in phone booths, and it has addresses and stuff. So how did he navigate? Did he have a GPS system? Like, is that really wasn't prevalent or available for public use? If it
there
even
was no GPS mapping.
Yeah, so like,
but he may have had, he
just had the street map. There was probably database maps of the city, and it's like, okay, here's the street sign.
Because so you had like those elements. Like if you think about stuff too much, things fall apart in any movie. But I did like that the plot was he goes back in time, doesn't know, all he knows is a name, so he's just gonna kill everyone with that name in that area.
Systematically too. Starting with the first one through the last.
Yeah, it's a very original premise, but a simple plot, which is good. You know what I mean? Like
it's a high concept.
The dressing around it is complicated, but it's somebody sent to kill somebody, and and another person to protect them.
And Kyle Reese goes back with a picture of what she looks like, so he will be able to quickly find the real Sarah Connor. Yeah. But it is funny, so like when the Terminator comes back through time, he comes up naked and kills Bill Paxton and his group of like punks.
Real quick,
who's the other punk?
Bill Paxton is the only person I know of that has been killed by a Terminator, by an alien, and by a Predator. So he's got the hat trick on.
Oh man, there was somebody next to him. I'm like, oh, who is that too? Because obviously
it was this dude that's been in a bunch of movies as a bad guy and
Brian
shows.
Thompson. Yes, the movie I've watched him in. He's in Mortal Kombat. Shao Kahn in Mortal Kombat.
Yes. And
he is in this other movie.
He was like on Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah, he's
a ton of stuff.
He's he's been in a bunch of different.
Okay,
stuff.
Hired to Kill is the film I'm thinking of that I've watched. I've watched this movie at least twice. A fashion photographer and 7 models travel to South America Island Fortress, ostensibly to do a fashion shoot. In reality, the photographer is a mercenary, and their job is to free an imprisoned rebel leader. So it's him. He's very sexist, and basically just hates women, other than to sleep with them. So he has to act like a effeminate or gay fashion designer with these women, and he's not stellar in the role, but man, that is a movie and a half.
So and two, him, he's one of the punks that's at the beginning when Arnold goes and gets his clothes.
He gets his heart ripped out.
But he did bulk up in later years to be more comparable looking to Arnold. Probably not because of that.
Well, I think something that was kind of cool in this movie too is this movie kind of popularized the naked theory in time travel, because a lot of movies
you can't take. Because there's the entire part where they're in the police station and Kyle Reese is explaining to them what's happened. Yeah. And he's like, well, why'd you come through naked? Why didn't you bring a laser gun? He's like, well, you can only come through with organic matter. It can't be anything.
That's what happens in Ninja Turtles 3, essentially. Only they brought their shorts for some reason.
Yeah. So how the Terminator theory is well, he's covered in organic matter. Yeah. I was like, well, I guess that's like as long as the outer shell is.
They do a great job of simply explaining a lot of things.
Yeah, so because that was kind of a cool.
One, two,
it was cool to see the perspective of like people who obviously didn't believe this guy.
Yeah,
but even the doctor's like, I've never heard somebody have this in depth of a story. It's usually
this elaborate of a story. So it falls
apart,
and it's nice because Arnold comes back as a T-1000 or whatever, as the Terminator or whatever the number, or T-100, 800, whatever. He comes back as a Terminator. And T-1000, I think, is he goes. Oh yeah, that's right, because that's the liquid metal one. He goes and quickly finds a group of people to take clothes from. Finds a gun store, and it's was it Dick Miller?
Yeah, Dick Miller
is the gun store owner. So the movie The Guest has a scene that's almost the exact same as this, where he goes to a gun dealer and like looks through all the weapons and is playing with them and stuff. And he's like, "So what do you want?" He's like, "All of them." And then the guy's like, "Well, how you be paying for it?" And then you kill the dealer. Yeah, so both movies have that exact scene. So I think that was intentional in The Guest.
I think the one thing that kind of speaks more to like the time frame is like in the 80s. Like, there was you had this huge bulked up dude with sunglasses on that's dressed like whatever, a punk rocker, getting like with an in-depth knowledge of firearms.
So he's like, this is back before there was an assault weapons ban. He's like, I want the Uzi. And then he's like, he's like, well, some of these guns take in a couple weeks for the the paperwork to come in, but you can take the rifles today. And then he's like, wait a minute, you can't do that. As he starts putting shells in the shotgun, he shoots and kills them.
But I think the one thing that's kind of cool about the Terminator is this like, there's something kind of cool, and this is the tie into Resident Evil, like with the Tyrant. No, because like there's something cool about this
unstoppable
forces that, because this movie effectively did it, and you don't get that a lot of times. Because like to me, and it's something I post on Twitter, it's like I find this vastly more effective than anything Friday 13th or Halloween's ever done. Well, the
difference is
because this makes sense for it to be an unstoppable force. Because for one, he's freaking huge, and two, you're a robot. You're not.
Yeah, so I think giving the element of he is a human cyborg creation or whatever, the stakes that he is made of almost indestructible metal or something, and you literally get to see him take damage and how it affects him or not.
Yeah.
So you literally get to see the stakes and you understand how he can keep coming. If it's supposedly like in Halloween, a normal dude who gets his hand blown off, and he doesn't really flinch or whatever, then it's a little bit more like, well, is there...
Like, what's happening?
And Jason, before he becomes like a supernatural, he gets a hatchet to the shoulder, an axe in the head, and then Corey Feldman stabs him to death. But there's just no relative information about like what amount of damage puts them down for good. Yeah. As opposed to Terminator, you get a lot clearer understanding of that.
Yeah, to me it makes more sense. And two, again, like Arnold's vastly more imposing than any of those characters were.
Well, and two, and it is funny. It's like rewatching this movie. I forgot how much of the future war stuff it shows.
Yeah, quite a bit.
And, like his character is fleshed out because he comes back. So Arnold's huge, bulky, Mr. Universe dude. And Kyle Reese is in good shape, but not that huge. Kind of more of a normal physique, just in, really good shape for a normal size
Especially
person.
For the 80s. A lot of times people were in like good shape because Arnold's on a different level. But it's just funny because you see something.
I think it was far more effective to send back Kyle Reese being a thin but, very fit guy as opposed to a Stallone type or another. If you send back somebody that's just a foil to Schwarzenegger, then it doesn't work. I think having someone that is smaller and seems more vulnerable to the attack.
It's a disadvantage.
Because if you send back a freaking, roided out, monster hulking dude, if you send back, not saying he's on roids, but if you send back like a Hulk Hogan size,
he was on roids,
guy. If you send somebody back that's equal in size or similar in size,
it negates.
It takes away from it. So I think having the smaller, more fleet-footed
doesn't
soldier.
Always, that's what they did in the sequel, basically.
But in the sequel, they reversed it so that the good guy is the bigger, bulkier, slower character, and then the villain is the more normal-sized guy that just so happens to have like the metal morphing abilities. Yeah. So they kind of twist things around a little bit. But I do like that, Kyle Reese comes in and has a lot more difficult time getting clothes and any type of weapon.
Yeah, because he starts off at a disadvantage because like when he comes in, like the cops are there and they start chasing him, and of course he's going to run. So he has the entire ordeal where he not only is he having to deal with the Terminator,
he's stealing a homeless dude's pants in the beginning.
But I'm saying, and he wears them throughout the entire movie, which is funny. But something about 80s movies and time travel, they loved Nikes. Because he goes
Back to the Future. Yeah. I think at the time, Nike was a very popular, prevalent brand, and they may have been actively trying to get movies to use their stuff.
It's just funny that like in any movie that had time travel in the 80s, like Nikes, because it was always like you knew that because they even did a shot of it where you knew it was like a Nike.
Because both him and Sarah Connor were wearing Nikes. Because there's a scene where they later get out of like a car and it's like a foot shot and it shows their shoes. So I would wonder if that was like product placement.
Oh, it had to have been.
But yeah, so like the movie showed a lot more of like the future war stuff than I remembered.
Yeah,
and like the other thing that like stuck out to me is like, so you have Arnold starting, like the Terminator starts killing the random Sarah Connors, and then Sarah Connor sees it on the TV and she's like, oh, they're killing Sarah Connors, and then she's gonna go out to the club or whatever, and then that's when the Terminator is able to follow her there.
Well, she was actually at a restaurant and she saw that.
Too. Also, I think they do a really good job of showing her.
Oh, because she calls her friend to come get her, and then he hears
She is a very normal, like, I don't know, 20-year-old, girl living. I guess it's L.A., right? Yeah, in L.A. She works at a diner, has a crappy job. Like from that, you can easily see, man, they really try to make a transformation into her by the end of this film, which I think is really an important part
and it grounds the character because she doesn't start off as the badass super soldier. She starts off as just a normal everyday person.
They're just like doing their hair, listening to music, getting ready. Like, 80s, I like those scenes a whole
lot. The ultimate 80s hair.
Because it just feels, I don't know, it feels like, the everyman and every woman.
And then you contrast that with Terminator 2, where she's, a lot more fit and like kind of like doomsday prepper, but not wrong because she literally knows what's going to happen. So I think when you have the character, like that's why I'm glad this new one's bringing back Linda Hamilton, because between Terminator 1 and 2, she makes a huge character. Her character evolves a ton. And to see her go from, because usually in a lot of movies, it's the guy that goes from like the kind of normal guy to the badass. Even when it doesn't make any sense.
Well, it's kind of like even with Aliens, it's James Cameron.
Well, yeah, Sigourney Weaver.
Because she went from being kind of like
just a worker
to where the next one, she is the one that knows because she survived it. And
so there is a bit of parallel.
I was thinking about this film too, just because, some people like the first Terminator a lot because they feel like it is kind of scarier and just more
contained.
I don't say grounded, but I think they just like the scope of it. The sequel is definitely this big action popcorn blockbuster with big set pieces and everything, and it's just more thrilling than it is tense. But it also made me think, after Alien, Terminator 1 is a strong parallel to Alien. It's just this one unstoppable force, and you can see why they gave James Cameron Alien,
or why
2.
why he'd be interested, because the story of Aliens kicks off essentially with where Sarah Connor would kick off.
Yeah, which is interesting. They probably expected him to make just basically another Terminator or Alien film. He made Aliens, but then Terminator 2 is almost like Aliens as well, where it just amps it up. It's funny to see.
They're so similar.
It's funny to see them. They probably casted him perfectly as a director, like, oh, this is kind of like Alien, but then he totally flipped it on its head.
And two, like, so the first Terminator is kind of a self-contained story that has world-altering stakes,
but it's so
in
small.
The future. But the story itself is really just one woman being killed.
But we were talking about this previous to the podcast, and this is where I kind of talk about Halloween. And this is relevant only for one part. Because I can't remember which one it is, but there's a Halloween movie where at the end,
5.
At the end, he's arrested and he's in a police station. And you see this silhouette in black come in and kill all the cops. Then he breaks out, and then it turns out just a really lame, like, I'm an Irish guy, and it's so lame. This is the movie this is the scene you wanted to see in that movie where it's some type of like creepy badass.
Yeah. So to flesh out what you're saying, so in Halloween 5, Michael Myers gets beat down by a piece of wood under a blanket chain thing by Dr. Loomis, and he gets put in prison. And when he's sitting in the prison cell, some mysterious guy comes in that has like this creepy looking hand, but it was the same actor, the same stunt actor, an actor who was doing Michael Myers and the Man in Black.
Yeah.
Because he talked about that Halloween 5 panel we recorded that we were forced to take down off YouTube. Unrelated, but so that was where Michael Myers is in prison. This kind of mysterious guy comes in with like a Tommy gun and shoots and kills all the cops and lets Michael out. And then, it's kind of this weird, creepy end that really does open up a lot of possibilities for that franchise to go somewhere weird. And then they went into an unsatisfying place with it in the next movie. But Terminator has where Kyle Reese is in jail, like the police station.
He's being interrogated.
And the Terminator comes in and is just destroying the police department.
And we kind of forgot, too, to talk about the detectives. You have Lance Hendrickson, who's a detective, and you have the sergeant, I guess.
So then Aliens has Lance Hendrickson, Bill Paxton, so Michael Biehn, so a bunch of people that Cameron's worked with before.
And even the Marine stuff is kind of similar because you look at the suit that he's wearing in Terminator.
The ships and everything.
Yeah, it's very similar. Which Halo ripped off all of it. But then, I do like that, though, because you have the police scene's great because he comes in. It's funny because I guess he says, "I'll be back" in Terminator 2 as well. But that's like Arnold's catchphrase. But he says it in that one at first because he comes in, the guy won't let him in. He kind of looks at everything. He's like, "I'll be back." And then he just drives in with...
Kyle Reese starts to come with me if you want to live.
Yeah.
Also in this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And two, see, I really do like the element that Kyle Reese is really just at the seat, on the seat of his pants, like barely getting by throughout.
Yeah.
And, even though he's resourceful and makes like the modified shotgun and all this stuff.
The pipe bombs. And
he doesn't even know how to stop him. He just
knows that you got to slow him down and get away. And, you still have like those elements. But then like the other funny thing that if you think about it is a dude claims he's from the future wearing a homeless dude's pants. And he convinces a woman within 24 hours to raw dog and sleep with them.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it implies that he's a virgin too, which is like, or just hasn't been with the woman because he has been in love with her or something. So it's kind of like a thing that in real life, if you were to hear that, would be kind of creepy. It's like, oh, you have a picture of me and you're in love with me, but we've never met.
I've just seen you on the internet and I'm in love with you.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a lot. I feel like that plot point plays much differently in the world of today with internet stalkers and stuff.
I think it still is weird, but I think too, like probably... I'm just trying to
give him a thing for his
but I'm just trying to give him benefit of the doubt is that it was probably a woman that was like every guy probably felt that way.
If she's like a savior of humanity and somebody that plays a huge role in you even having a chance to live and fight another day, there's probably just a lot of admiration for her as a person.
Yeah, a lot of Christians want to bone Mother Mary.
Oh,
that's essentially what that is, right?
Yeah,
but like,
but
just like so looking very fondly and even growing like feelings or infatuation for someone that's a central part of like why your world even exists. But like so they sleep together, and then so there's like the tragic element too. He dies.
Yeah.
Because he blows up he puts the stick of or the pipe bomb in the Terminator and falls down. So you have like these different action set pieces. Like you have like the one at the bar where that's kind of quick.
That. But the bar is cool because like she's at the bar. She's thinking that Kyle's the one that's trying to kill her
because she notices that he's following her.
And so she goes in the bar and calls the police, and they're sending a car there to get him. Well, then Arnold at the same time is killing her roommate and boyfriend, which actually. That is very reminiscent to something out of Halloween or Friday 13th, just because the way he's just tossing that dude around like a rag doll.
Yeah.
And he could just crush his head.
And the guy is pretty big that's fighting him, so it's kind of.
And then, but that's to me is like something right out of it.
Pull out, Kyle.
Yeah. But like, you had that scene where, like, that was straight out of like just a slasher movie because she's in the other room listening to music, not paying attention. And then her boyfriend's in the other room just getting tossed around like a rag doll, and she comes through and he flies through and he's obviously dead at that point. And then he just shoots her, he has
the laser sight gun.
Then he just happens to hear Sarah Connor call and say, this is Sarah, blah, 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 I'm here. And he goes to the bar. I just love, though, when she, like, you have that moment where she sees Kyle, she thinks that that's the one that's after her.
Yeah, because he's following her.
And then at the same time, like, Arnold's walking by.
Yeah.
So you have everybody in that just kind of falls into place at that one moment, and, he sees her, and the shootout starts. Which I just like that scene a lot because a lot of times you don't really get that in a public place, because the cop is like, "What's staying in a public place? You'll be safe," and it doesn't matter. The Terminator doesn't care.
Yeah, because its only goal is to kill her. Once she's dead, it's just kind of stuck there. So if it just self-destructs or whatever,
shuts down. Yeah.
So like you have, like that element, and then you have like some cool car chases that they pulled off with relatively, lower budget for the time. You have the police station shootout.
I think the beginning of this film especially does such a good job at cross-cutting between all the different stories.
Yeah,
giving you so much information, but also some good action. Like the beginning of it is so packed, and then it slows down. I think and it should probably whenever they kind of go away to the cabin and stuff.
Yeah.
But man, that when it's cross cutting between all those things like that you're talking about, it's
it's
so
a lot
well-paced.
of juggling to have Sarah Connor, the Terminator, and Kyle Reese, and for it to all make sense.
And the detectives.
And the detectives, who like the Lance Henriksen character, and then you also have like the flashbacks or the flashbacks to the.
Well, it's almost like he has
Flash
PTSD. You know,
well, he's a soldier who's just been involved in a world that's shit from beginning to end.
Yeah, and one thing I like too is a nice touch is somehow they used dogs to identify who they were, because at first they said they had the rubber skin, which they could just look at them and tell. And then they got that actual
organic skin.
Yeah, the organic skin, so they used the dogs. And so you had the entire scene where like he's in the basement of their area, and then the Terminator were to come in and start.
It doesn't look like Arnold. It's a different.
They should just walk around with packets of magnets and just toss them at people to see if they stick.
It's one of those things where like this movie could have been really chintzy, but they did really have a fleshed out world, and they had most of the answers to what they put out.
And two, so like rewatching this movie, you know, like
it just feels so much further ahead of the audience and their expectations.
Terminator 2 is something I remember holding up pretty well to today. Even.
Yeah, it's still good.
Still looking very good. So Terminator 1 still looked good, but there's some elements like when the Terminator's in like the hotel or the apartment,
cutting his eye
and
off.
he's cutting the skin off around his eye and stuff. Some of that looks relatively fake.
This is way rougher than the second one.
And what was funny,
it was a lot later too, actually.
Yeah, it was like
it was 84 to 91, and a huge like one of the like because at the time Terminator 2 was made, it's one of the biggest budgeted movies ever made.
Yeah.
And then this one was more of like a lower budget kind of you know sci-fi thriller shot in the dark from a studio. But
like you were saying, the prosthetics they used later in the film would just look better.
The prosthetics where he's like driving and stuff, and you see like when he's walking around, there's the prosthetic on his face that looks far better than like I guess like the puppet or whatever they were using to have like when he's like looking in the mirror and his head's turning.
Oh yeah.
And they use a couple of shots of that too when he's driving the semi.
Yeah.
And it's like the prosthetic that they had on him looks so much better than that. But I guess, you know, too, when you're talking about a movie that came out in 84, the audiences that time weren't used to seeing photorealistic stuff like that. So it's a lot more acceptable for things to kind of have that uncanny valley kind of unrealistic
that's really
look.
what came to my mind is like because that. But I still take
that looks
over.
way better than Van Helsing, or we're talking about like the Mummy and stuff like that. With those kind of like 2000 CGI stuff,
and it does the Ray Harryhausen. It looks like stop motion.
Yeah,
and, you know, Terminator walking around.
Oh yeah, like in the Terminator, like when he's walking around. But that's still, I vastly prefer that to like even some modern day CG where it just you know, because at that at least there's a tangible element to it.
I assume the CG in the new one will be done really well because of Tim Miller's background. You know, like he came from a animation studio and stuff, and that was his whole deal before that.
Did he do one of the John Wicks?
No, he did
the guy.
One of the John Wick directors directed Deadpool 2.
Yeah, okay. He did. I don't know if did you see the girl with the dragon tattoo? The Fincher, the Fincher one.
Yeah.
He did his studio did the opening animation with all that stuff. Like that was when I first heard about, you know, he started getting a lot of buzz.
Yeah, so like the Terminator movie itself, so like I feel like the first Terminator is probably the most self-contained story of the entire series.
Yeah.
Because it's basically saying like from the future, this is going to happen. We need the savior of humanity to be born. We need his mother to stay alive, so they sent back one robot to kill her. We sent back one guy to stop them, and that's the end of the story. And then they're able to stop the Terminator because they have the scene where he's in the semi, it's got like fuel in it, and then it blows up and wrecks, and he comes out damaged and like limping and stuff.
What I like is there's a gradual transformation. At the beginning, he's very human. And then throughout the movie, as he takes damage,
he becomes less human looking.
He becomes less human looking. And at the end is full robotic, creepy. Like I do really like how they did that.
It's funny too that Schwarzenegger had nothing to do with the end of this film, though. You know what I mean? It's funny to think about the lead role. Yeah, or not the lead role, but the marquee actor post this movie. I know when it came out, it wasn't like, oh, Schwarzenegger, but but it's just funny, like, oh, we don't need you for the last 30 minutes of this film.
Yeah, but just real quick, I really do like. It's going back a couple of scenes, but like the police station, like it was just, even though he's in there like ravaging it, it is kind of cool. He's just the way it all works out, because he's taking damage the entire time. So these guys that were like doubting the story of they were shooting it and seeing it wasn't doing anything, and then they were killed.
Because that is an interesting point that he basically came to them and just showed them,
and they're like, right, future robots, like, but then you run into it.
And is the doctor just gone at this time?
Yeah, he walks in.
He passed.
That's right. That's right.
He passes the Terminator.
Sequel,
Yeah, because he's like, in the sequel with Linda Hamilton and stuff. But it is so funny because he leaves the police station and goes through the same doors and brushes past the Terminator and wouldn't think anything of it. And then you have that scene where he just decimates the police station. Yeah. And then, you have like the daring escape and all the cop cars involved and all that stuff.
Well, actually, I like the first part where they are being chased and he's in the police car. And I can't remember if they did this in any of the other movies, but the Terminator had the ability to replicate voices.
No, he did in other ones.
Yeah, the second one especially.
So the other...
John Connor's adoptive parents.
Yes. Okay. But something a touch that I really liked throughout this movie that I kind of forgot about, and part of it's probably because of the edited versions for TV. When people asked him questions, it showed like the branching logic tree in his head, and then like one of them was like "fuck you." Yeah. So he's like, "Fuck you, asshole."
No, it was the it was the janitor or landlord or whatever he was saying. It was like saying something. He's like, "Fuck you, asshole."
So I just love that it shows those little touches of like. He has like a branching logic tree, and it tells him like, well, here's what you like. I guess the estimation was this is most likely to end this interaction because he doesn't unnecessarily kill people. Have nothing to do with his mission. It's only if they have to do with his mission or they're in his way. Yeah,
because like he doesn't kill.
I think so. Like when he's trying to kill Sarah Connor in the club, he does shoot like random people there or in the bar.
Yeah, but only when he
probably just wants to conserve ammo. You know what I mean? It's a situation.
Well, and I think too, knowing that causing less of a stir makes it likelier that he'll pull off the mission. Yeah. Yeah, and then like the entire reason that Sarah Connor and Kyle Reese get caught again by the Terminator is that she calls her mom to tell her mom to go to a cabin and to hide away and stuff.
And he found her address book and then went through it and went to the Connor in there.
So it is funny that like this movie in today's world would be much different if the Terminator had never been made and it got made today, because they could just go back with this database of information and most likely just know exactly where to go. Yeah. With social media and all that stuff, with timestamps and all that, like say that, there's enough of the internet left, you could figure out in the past where someone was likely at based on social media stuff. So I do like this movie set in the era when none of that existed.
Yeah, because that would be so exhausting.
And it's more organic because it's not like, oh, I pulled up this Instagram photo that was taken at 12:38 p.m. on a Tuesday at this restaurant, so I know where they're at. Like that would be boring. Having to go through the phone book one by one without a picture of her, that I more enjoy. Yeah, and it's just like that. There's more self-contained storytelling. Now, I still think personally I prefer Terminator 2 overall, just because it's the movie I watched more. It was like a thrilling movie. And like I said, at that age, for whatever reason, I was obsessed with dirt bikes and just...
I mean, I think everybody kind of gets...
Well, when you're a kid and you're not able...
It's an awesome dirt bike scene, the whole long stretch,
Yeah.
Huge.
And then like when like Arnold gets him on the motorcycle and stuff.
Well, I think there's just a couple more. There's a lot more iconic scenes in Terminator because again, like I've seen that so much, I get things confused.
Oh, and what's the guy's name? That's his redheaded mullet friend in the second one. He was on Salute Your Shorts.
Yeah. But like in the second one, you have the real famous scene where he's like walking through the mall and he has the roses.
Yeah.
And he flips out and it's a shotgun. Like that's cool.
And then it's like the huge to that point they hadn't revealed the hand as to whether or not he was another robotic killer and the other one was the good guy. Yeah. And then you find out that he is the hero and the other Terminator is the villain.
I wonder how the marketing was for at the time. You know what I mean? Like what they revealed.
I mean, I remember I'll be back. Hasta la vista, baby. Like I remember that stuff. I can't remember if that was more after it or before.
Well, like if they showed like, hey, he's not the villain this time. You would think they would. You would think that they
because his star had risen a lot by then. Arnold, because they were Predator and all these other things. So, he was a big star at that point.
Because he'd already been in Conan at this point, but I think, like, because the second one didn't do as good, but I think...
Conan the Barbarian.
Yeah, but something about this movie, I think, is where they just kind of...
Because you had, like, Terminator, he was in Conan, he was in Predator, he was in Commando, he was in... wasn't Twins by then?
Yeah, probably.
Was Kindergarten Cop? I'm forgetting what years all these things came out.
Kindergarten feels like it was around 90.
Yeah.
91.
Yeah, so but I'm just saying, like, leading up to Terminator 2, like, his star was huge. He was one of the biggest stars on the planet. And then True Lies, another James Cameron movie. So you just had, like, this kind of perfect storm of somebody before they were a huge star, and he became a star for his physicality and kind of his his acting style, which was very flat at the time. Well, he was like, perfect for the Terminator.
Yeah, but he was perfect for the Terminator, but too, like his accent, his body type, all that was like all negatives, but it worked perfectly for the Terminator because it just seems so out of place.
If you think about in reality, though, if you're wanting to hide a robot, then why would you make him a huge bodybuilder with an accent?
I know you went, but when I was talking about the reason why I see parallels to this and the Tyrant is for one, they're both like T something, and then you have a similar premise of like they have this thing that's supposed to be incognito. But then you have this massive hulking thing that's walking around stalking people.
Well, I think in the Resident Evil, they were just sending them in to destroy stuff, and it wasn't really their incognito. They were just...
Well, no, I mean, that's why they were in the trench coat. And,
he was wearing a hat, William. Nobody knows what he's in.
Fedora. He was a good guy, okay? He was a nice guy.
But like in the original one, it was, I think, to get Sherry. And then in the second one, it was just to kill the survivor. So there are parallels there. I don't know how much they drew from anything, but... You know, Arnold Schwarzenegger falls in lava and gets blown up, and the Tyrant falls in lava and gets blown up.
I mean, like those games pull from a lot of popular culture.
Yeah, but I just wonder, but it's just kind of relevant because it's just both stalking, unrelenting forces that like you really can't stop with just regular weaponry.
But yeah, so like, yeah,
you have reasons why. I think that's why I like the Terminator so much, is because it's like there's a lot of backstory.
But to me, the Terminator series
is just so. You know,
and
so
constant.
Strong and
the thing is, like,
you feel like there's no end.
You can like, tell the cops that, and they just like, you know, and they're like, well, you know, because they were like trying to show her how goofy all this is by letting her listen to what they were talking about.
Yeah, letting her like, you're gonna raw dog this guy.
Yeah,
but you know, like the movie does feel a lot more organic. Like I said, I think through the spectrum of today. If somebody had never seen these movies who was 16 years old and they watched Terminator for the first time, some of it might come across a little bit hokey or unrealistic now. But I think, like I said, in the pre-internet era, the pre-Facebook stalker era, a lot of the pre-smartphone era, a lot of this stuff would be more plausible and more believable. Like, as you learn about stuff in real life that people believed and acted on.
Well, like Abducted in Plain Sight is a really good example.
Well, and like, too, we talked about, and I think it's the last episode, Momo, like the internet challenge, scary, creepypasta thing. Like, people are all talking about how it's so real. And because I've seen people, like, not to digress too much, the thing just made me mad. Somebody's like, my kid saw Momo in a video. My kid doesn't lie. They would never lie. They would never make anything up. It's like, well, does your kid believe Santa? Yes. Have they talked about hearing Santa on the roof? Have they?
You know, look, if there's a kid listening to this podcast about Santa, you just ruined
But my point is, I think, people are if somebody else believes stuff and it's a big thing, people like to be part of the crowd. They like to be part of
it's
something.
Exciting. It's something that they'd be like, oh, this happened to me. Because how many things did you hear when you were kids, we were all kids, that were like,
I remember
things were viral.
I remember talking about telling people I had a rocket pack I could fly around the neighborhood with.
Yeah.
So obviously I did, but...
I'm just saying, but there's like so many things, like Bloody Mary was something that was going around when we were younger.
It's just, I think it'd be a lot easier for people to believe all this stuff and for this to be, plausible in the 80s, even 90s than it is today.
Yeah.
But, like that saying, like, I think that it's a great slice of time. Like, it is kind of that era.
The LA felt very grimy, almost like how New York was portrayed a lot at that time.
I liked it.
I'm not saying it's was inaccurate because I don't know at all, but a lot of times when you saw, at least in the late 80s, LA in the late 80s and stuff, it did feel more glamorous and like, hey, this is the place to be. Yeah. New York always felt like this is a cesspool.
It was portrayed as...
It was portrayed like the LA is portrayed in this film, basically, trashy and just... it was an interesting bent on LA.
Punks with switchblades standing around waiting to assault huge Austrian bodybuilders.
You think of all the people
there during those eras. I only know what I know through cinema, but it's just not the typical portrayal that I'm used to seeing.
Well, it's funny. You think about that opening scene. If you're sitting there at a park and you're doing nefarious activities. And then a huge
like smoking cigarettes and drinking beer,
with your switchblades and your blue hair and mohawks. And you got this guy walks over that's naked, and he walks over and says, "Give me your clothes." Like, what's the best outcome there?
Give me your clothes.
But I like how they all start stabbing him, and he just kills him real quick. But
that's an awesome scene and an introduction to him too, because he just punches right through. Not Bill Paxton, right? But the other guy.
No, the guy you talked about.
Yeah, and then you just see the bloody hand there. So you right away know.
No, he had a heart in his hand.
That's right. Yeah, and you right away you know like okay, this.
And
dude.
then that type of scene was revisited in almost every movie. So in the second one, he goes to the biker bar, and then the guy tries to put the cigar out on him. He just doesn't even flinch. Yeah. So they revisit that moment in all those movies
because it's such an iconic thing, though. Because like a lot of other movies, even Deadpool pulled from the naked time travel with Cable. So. There's just a lot of interesting things that go on with that. That it's just funny how those and like how many people, if you grew up watching like Tiny Toons or Animaniacs or any type of cartoon from the 90s, like how often was that referenced?
Well, I mean, too, so like people like Terminator was a hugely influential movie and series on movie making because the time travel element being used for sci-fi and all that stuff kind of became much more prevalent after that. And Terminator 2 was kind of like a big lesson in blockbuster filmmaking and sequels, and
that nobody really took to heart because that many sequels are just
Well, I mean, I think for a lot that did give a lot more influence. And two, another thing is you have Terminator 1 and 2 were James Cameron's vision, and then the ones after that weren't really. And then you had Alien was Ridley Scott, and then Aliens was James Cameron, and then the ones after that were not either of those visions. And I think they're both examples, like Aliens and Terminator, of like franchises that don't have the original series people behind stuff. I mean, Ridley Scott came back to Aliens or Prometheus and Alien Covenant. Prometheus I liked, and I think was a good direction to go in. And then Covenant was like, well, they want to go out here with this, so let's just bring it back to what they know. But Terminator, it sounds like with James Cameron being involved and Linda Hamilton coming back and stuff like that, it should be something that I am interested to see. And I do like that I don't need to watch Salvation and Genesis first. I can just go in knowing what I know of the originals.
Well, I think what I like too is like, we kind of about this a little bit off the podcast, but I wonder when people are going to start to get Marveled out and Disneyed out, all these huge, because like Terminator is a huge franchise. But, it is kind of nice to revisit some of these things that, because essentially this is going to take you back to 1991, from saying that's the last one that counts. So it is kind of nice to have something like this while it is a huge franchise, and it was massively popular at one time, and, it's hopefully when they revisit it can do something and then give you a little bit of a break from... I have to watch 2 movies to be up to date on this.
But
I have
also,
to watch 37. So it's kind of nice that it's like, oh, okay. And then it's like, I'm very familiar with all these characters in here. And like, I think for most people, when we've talked about this podcast before, like Arnold Schwarzenegger, especially for our generation, like holds a special place because he was in so much stuff for a time. So regardless of what he is on the film, like regardless of what role he does, you just want to watch him because you like him. You're familiar
and it's one of those weird things too, where he is the furthest person from an everyman, and he played the everyman, and a lot, and like
Jingle All the Way.
Well, Jingle All the Way, he legit played it. In True Lies, he played that under the cover of being a secret agent, which I think was the perfect usage of him.
Yeah.
Because the entire irony is that he's an everyman, but he's actually a secret agent, which makes total sense. Like, So, but I think James Cameron is like one of the people who uses him best. Yeah. But I don't know. But then like McTiernan and Predator, I thought that was a perfect utilization of him too.
Man, and there's one that his kind of like first role back where he's like the sheriff in a town. He's just kind of like, I like that.
Yeah, his post-governorship.
Was that called The Last Stand? Or
it was something like that.
Yeah, it was from a director of, I think he did The Good, the Bad, and the Weird, a Korean director.
Yeah.
It was a fun movie because it's it was like old Arnold because he busts through a door and he just has to lay on the ground for a little bit before he can get up.
Yeah.
But it's like anytime you get him on screen, I think you're drawn to it. I guess that too might just be more of a product of when we grew up.
When they tried very hard to make Vin Diesel and The Rock the next Schwarzenegger in the early 2000s, The Rock went on to become something different, but as successful. And then Vin Diesel became very much like in these like 2 franchises that he is known for, Fast and Furious and Triple X.
But the thing is with Vin Diesel,
The Last Witch Hunter or whatever.
But those that flopped.
My question is like if you saw,
so the three. Well. Because
wasn't he in the Pacifier, the babysitter, where he plays or the Tooth Fairy?
Yeah, but like none of those. Those are all like.
It was the Pacifier because it's
it's Pacifier.
Like a Navy SEAL has to take care of kids, and then like The Rock was in the one where he's take care of a kid.
They really did try to do Kindergarten Cop again.
Yeah, but it's like and
those movies made money.
Yeah, they made money, but with Vin Diesel, like. If I seen him in public, like I never will. I don't want to be like, hey, how's it? But if you saw like Arnold or The Rock, I think they seem much more approachable.
Yeah,
because like Arnold Schwarzenegger seems like You know, I know he's had his own personal issues that have been on the news and stuff. But outside that, if you saw him, like, you'd probably be very nice.
But like going back to the movie The Terminator. So I think that this is a movie where, you know, if you have the nostalgia and if you'd seen that or aware of that franchise in its original time frame, you know, it's a classic. Yeah. I think it might be a little bit less effective for somebody that's coming in fresh that has never watched any of the movies.
I don't know, though. I mean, it's just...
Because there's some stuff like Predator. I feel Predator is timeless. Yeah. Because if you were to have that movie happen today, it would happen the same way.
Yeah.
Well, and two, just so many things that jump up, you know, like time travel and, yeah, all that stuff is just... It all, you know, I think the film holds up well, but, yeah, there's just something about it where it's like, man... You could see people not appreciating it as much. You know what I mean? I think you can appreciate Predator just as much.
Yeah.
But now you can't understand like kind of how original some of the sci-fi elements were to the Terminator.
Well,
I think that's where the appreciation.
And Terminator really made a lot of that palatable to mainstream audiences, or at least that and the sequel did.
But I think with the Terminator, at least like with Terminator, they created magic twice for sure. We'll see with this next one coming out. But like the Predator, they only did it once. I like Predator 2, but they can never recapture.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, things weren't replicated a whole bunch in Predator that, you know what I mean, that make it seem like now sci-fi films are so huge, the time travel, like, all that stuff is not as special anymore.
No.
And the action set pieces in this, while good and well constructed, are not even, Terminator 2 has some that still hold up as being like really, really impressive and fun. This Terminator does as well, but they just didn't have the budget, and it's just
I just do like though where like a lot of it is it just kind of, and I'm going back to Resident Evil, which is recent. There's moments where you can just run. Like they have weapons, but it's really, and if you shot the guy with the shotgun several times, you hit him with a car, he wrecked into a wall at 100 miles an hour, and he just gets like, what are you going to do?
Well, that's why Kyle Reese decided they're going to make pipe bombs, because that might actually be able to do something.
Yeah.
And then blowing up the semi and then blowing him up and stuff like. Yeah, so like it's set up like a good mythology for that universe, while in and of itself being a nice self-contained movie.
Yeah.
That at the time you look at like the horror movies, the slashers and stuff, those by 84 kind of died out because the slasher boom really ended by then. So this was a completely different approach of like, well, here's somebody that's like stalking and killing people with guns or other means, and it's sci-fi. And I think that did, cause some of a shift.
Yeah.
It's like I said, like when you think of Cameron, like the Terminator, well, he did Piranha, was it 3D or Piranha 2 or whatever, but then it was like uncredited and didn't want to be involved with it. So, but like the Terminator, Aliens, like The Abyss was more of like a high concept movie that wasn't like a super huge box office.
Was that like The Thing but underwater?
Yeah, it was like Ed Harris and others where there was like the alien thing underwater. Still like an interesting movie, and showed that he had some depth and wasn't just going back to the same well for everything. But like to do like Terminator, Aliens, Terminator 2, like True Lies, like that's a huge string of like high concept, high budget movies that succeeded. And of course, like Titanic being like one of the highest grossing movies of all time, and Avatar and stuff.
Yeah,
but
I mean, Avatar, I'm assuming those Avatar sequels will do very well, but was it Attila or what's the
Battle Alita?
Alita. That was box office wise, James Cameron misfire as far as him producing it. You know what I mean?
So that movie is still doing pretty well overseas. It could ultimately make enough money to warrant a sequel, mostly off the strong performance in China.
That's good. I really liked it. Like I watched it when it came out,
because that was directed by Robert Rodriguez.
Well, I was just thinking, like, producing wise, if that film doesn't do really well, if it doesn't. And then if Terminator for some reason does it, you know what I mean? Like he could have a couple misfires in a row and hopefully bank on Avatar. But somebody else said too, maybe some of the technology from that film, what's
Battle or Alita Battle Angel?
Alita. Maybe some of the technology developed in that is to be used in Avatar too. You know what I mean? Maybe that's where some of the money spent could be.
Well, I have heard that like they said that like most of that movie was all just like. Because it used to be you would have an actor in space, like so you would have like a person in a green screen set or whatever. But this movie, like Alita, was getting to the point that you really don't need anyone anywhere, and you can essentially just completely replace an actor's performance and make it look good enough that you really don't notice.
Yeah.
And
you just need to get mocap for the face.
So that's how, like, people are saying, like, oh, well, maybe those superhero movies in the future, they really can give the dude 48 packs and the women like a 2-inch waist and quadruple D breast. And
Maybe nobody wants to watch that.
But, you know, it's just one of those things where, like, technology-wise, Cameron has always been ahead of the curve in utilizing things. And, you know, because like we said, you know, like the Halo series pretty much wholesale lifted its aesthetic from Aliens.
Well, and Terminator. Just James Cameron in general. Like, it took almost everything from his aesthetic. Because there's, like...
And if they ever made a Halo movie, it would have looked a lot like Aliens, I think.
Yeah. Well, even Terminator, because going back, because you're looking at Terminator, like, the battle scenes, like, a lot of the stuff looks like that too, because it was James Cameron, so obviously some of that's going to kind of, you know, go over.
Yeah, and like the original Terminator had a lot more like models and stuff for the future battle things. And I think that works. I mean, I think, like I said, a lot of that holds up better than crappy CG from the late 90s and early 2000s.
Yeah. Well, one thing I liked is like they had the battles, but like even with Kyle, like a lot of stuff in there didn't always go right because like his partner got blown up by the machine.
Yeah.
And then like, you know, I kind of like that. It's just like essentially what you get from his like just a very crappy, tragic life. You know?
Yeah. His life is basically a nonstop war. Yeah. Then he gets to go back in time and have like a brief amount of happiness with someone that he idolized. And then dies.
I would have liked to seen a world where Catherine Bigelow got to do a sequel to the, you know, his ex-wife.
Yeah.
Just because
wasn't he married to Linda Hamilton or dated Linda Hamilton?
Yeah, so
that'd be awkward.
Yeah.
James Cameron.
But but like because I think Catherine Bigelow is phenomenal. So I would have liked, and especially her being a female, you know, based on this being
a female,
mostly female centric.
Well, the new one is going to be more female characters because Linda Hamilton,
but still, I think it's written by
Mackenzie Davis is in it. And stuff.
One or two guys, directed by a guy. You know what I mean? It just would have been interesting to see her spin on it because I don't know if you guys watch any of her recent stuff. I mean, like Detroit,
Zero Dark 30.
Detroit, I thought was really good. I mean, there was some conversations on should she have told that story, but she was like, well, nobody else was telling it. But I think she's very, very good, a very good director.
Question though, like with the new one coming out. It's kind of got the Halloween effect because you got Jamie Lee Curtis coming back, and this time you got Linda Hamilton coming back, who's like the centerpiece,
which makes an event.
Yeah. So, are you excited for the? I guess I know you've always been just in general a fan of Terminator.
I'm excited, but I also too I'm like, man, these other films kind of sullied some of the excitement because I mean this is like, I know we have Linda Hamilton back, but also too, you know, it's with Halloween, you know, really. Jamie Lee Curtis is kind of the only star. It's like we've at least had Schwarzenegger. You know, I mean, even in the last one, like if we hadn't had Schwarzenegger and her in a long time, I'd been like, oh yeah. But also because I feel like they've told some stories with Schwarzenegger. You know, in that last one, especially in Genesis, you're like, man, what are they going to do? I've already seen a future one. You know, with Salvation, I've already seen one set. You know, in more modern times with Genesis. So it's like, I hope whatever they do feels fresh. And I'm glad, I guess I like Schwarzenegger as kind of the good guy, the good Terminator, but I'm glad they're at least doing something, I guess, going back again. And maybe that's because they want to make a trilogy and maybe they're going to set up where, now we're going to have a good Schwarzenegger or they're going to throw him to the side because somebody else is playing a T-800, it seems. I
think they said there's going to be an actor that is the body where they CGI graft on a face.
Okay. Yeah. But anyway, so I think my excitement is lowered only because I've just seen Genesis not that long ago and I see Schwarzenegger back in that role. But
because for it to be rebooted after a 2015 movie, like at least at Halloween, there was a big gap between movies.
But I think we do have Linda Hamilton back, and that's
James Cameron.
And I'm glad.
Well, not director, but
no, but he's still his name is still
Mackenzie Davis, right?
Yeah,
she is. I think she's phenomenal. She's in Tully. She's in Blade Runner for a little bit, 2049.
Yeah, and she's on that one Black Mirror episode. Saying June
I just think when I look at
stuff, she's really good, and I'm excited for it. But I'm holding my breath. You know what I mean?
I mean, because given, like you said. But I think for me, I know James Cameron's not directing, but his name is attached.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like John Carpenter didn't direct, but his name was attached.
But also, too, like, honestly, the stuff James Cameron done, I haven't really cared for since the mid-90s. You know what I mean? Like, I don't, you know, Titanic can be a great film. It's, you know,
it's not my
whatever. It's not my cup of tea.
Yeah.
But, you know, I was impressed, and I don't really like to crap on Avatar that much, even though it wasn't really anything that blew me away from a technological standpoint. But and I thought it was fine, but it wasn't like
I watched it.
Such like
well, I mean, he was the creator of Dark Angel, the Jessica Alba TV series.
I did like that. I did like that as a young teen. But you know what I mean? Like, he hasn't really, James Cameron hasn't shown me any reason to be really excited about his stuff. That's the other issue too.
But I guess too, though,
Tim Miller did a good job with Deadpool.
I like Tim Miller, but I think with him, like, I think with James Cameron, just not, since he's just attached to it and he's like probably a producer or something, I think it makes me like a little bit better, because it's kind of like John Carpenter. I don't really want a John Carpenter directed Halloween because, you know, same thing with him.
I think he's kind of past directing stuff of that nature.
But I just think, like, with Cameron, having just some of the original, I always feel like when you get some of these people attached to it that hadn't been attached to it for a long time.
When you get the band back together.
Yeah, it's like, I feel like even if it's subpar, it's still a lot better product
just think
than
about,
could have been.
Think about how many bands where a prominent member of the band leaves, and then they do like shows with a different singer or whatever.
Yeah.
And then they bring the original member back, and then it's kind of a dud. Like Guns N' Roses. Axl Rose wasn't involved, and he came back.
But that was his personality.
Plenty of films do that too, though. You know what I mean? Like, I know people are like, what? Dumb and Dumber 2, like, actually, I kind of like that film, but that was the same thing too. They got back the original directors.
Yeah.
You know, both of them who've done a lot of stuff since then, like, just because you're bringing everybody back doesn't mean you can necessarily recreate the magic.
But see, I think with comedy, though, more so than anything else, is like, because Jim Carrey is such a different person now than he was then. Because like Jim Carrey's kind of, he's not the Jim Carrey from the 90s. You know, he's transformed a lot, and actually, what was the other actor's name in there?
Jeff Daniels.
Jeff Daniels. He was not a huge comedic actor prior to that, right? So like, he was a little bit different but with Jim Carrey is like, I think he's just such a different mind space now, even when that came out. That,
well, I think I'm just saying, like, just because, you know, because everybody grows and everybody changes, you know what I mean? Just like, again, I wasn't big on the new Halloween, you know.
I wasn't either. I like certain parts.
There's just, that's also not a surefire thing. It's interesting to see what Cameron direction he wants to take. That's when I'm interested to see what direction he wanted to take the third one in.
Yeah.
But I've been watching interviews and stuff with him and Tim Miller on they were on some stage. I watched these a while back because I am excited for it. But I really want to see a trailer because the story details are non-existent.
Well, if you look on IMDb, it's like no plot.
Yeah, like I'm really interested to see what it is.
And it comes out in
I'll start getting excited. You know, once I start seeing what this film is about. But right now, I've seen so many different facets of the Terminator story and the film since that I'm like, I just need to see something to be excited about. It doesn't feel like, oh, this is their version of that story I've already seen.
I just think it's nice to be able to get excited for movies that aren't, you know,
well, I mean, it's still
Star
a franchise.
I
get excited about other films more, though. You know what I mean? Like, basically, if I hear a Paul Thomas Anderson film's coming out, you know what I mean? Like, I get excited for different directors.
Like, I understand Terminator is a huge franchise, but again, like, for me, it hasn't been relevant for so long. It's been out, but like, I didn't care.
It hasn't been a touchstone in cultural
since 91
relevance.
So, you know, for me, I do, like, as I was talking about, it was funny because I was watching Wayne's World after I watched Terminator, and Wayne's World came out in 92. So T2 came out in 91, but there's a reference where like Wayne's driving down the road and he gets pulled over by a cop on a motorcycle.
And it's Robert Patrick.
And he's like, have you seen John Connor? He's like, and just screams at the camera. And it's funny that even happened because that was so close. So I wonder if they were like even
they
filming.
They probably wouldn't let that happen today.
No, I don't think they'd let that happen today.
But yeah, so I guess we can kind of wrap up our thoughts on Terminator. So giving this a score out of 10. So Derek, what would you give it?
I'm going 9 out of 10 because to me it's just...
You're going what?
9 out of 10.
Okay.
And just like you said, I'm going 10.
No, 9 out of 10 because I just love, like... There's another movie from the 80s I cannot think of what it's like, The Hitchhiker or something. And
the Rutger Hauer one?
I don't know. It's got the guy from Blade Runner in it.
Yeah,
okay. Yeah, like it kind of reminds... I haven't watched that movie in so long, so I might be completely off base here. But I just kind of like those stalkerish movies and where there's actually... You get to see what it is. But like this one, you have the Unstoppable Force... You kind of have Linda Hamilton, which I really like her as a character because she is kind of like every woman in the beginning, you know, when she drives like a Vespa around or something.
Scooter.
So I like that, you know, and it's like Sean said, it's kind of like a gritty version of Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. And, you know, like it kind of look like, I know they're in an apartment, but it really looks like they're in a hotel room from the way that it's designed and stuff. But one thing we didn't bring back was the weird phone call that she got from the other woman's boyfriend. He's like, I'm going to take your dress off of my tongue and then I'm going to do this and that. But I don't know. I just really like the Arnold Schwarzenegger, like, unstoppable force because it's
something. Terminator.
It's something that is fresh in that movie. Now I don't know how much it translates to because it's been done so much, But and again, maybe too, just after playing Resident Evil and dealing with Mr. X in it, like that makes me like it that much more because like you can see the similarities in it.
So maybe they should make a Terminator game because like Alien Isolation worked well, where you have an alien that comes after you. So having a Terminator game would be fun.
Yeah, it would be.
There's a million, but I see what you're saying. Yeah, no, like you're not playing as the Terminator.
Yeah, you're playing as.
Let's just say that you're like in an open world Grand Theft Auto type world, and the Terminator's just stalking you, and if you leave clues, it'll find you, and you have like objectives to pull off or something.
Yeah,
like,
I think that could be fun. That could be really cool. But you can see how it could work in with Mr. X. It's just like you hear it coming, but your weapon. I just like that because it's a lot of movies don't do that effectively, or if they do it, it's something that's like it's an alien or it's Jason Voorhees or it's Michael Myers, and you shoot him with a shotgun in the face 17 times and get right back up. But with this one, there's a reason for it, so I do enjoy that a lot, and just there's certain scenes in it that are just perfect. I love the police, the apartment scene, and just it is kind of ridiculous when they're driving down the road shooting each other with shotguns from here to the wall over there, and they're missing. But I just like all that. I think it makes it fun. I just like that they're never safe because the Terminator's just always right behind them.
Yeah. So Sean,
I'd probably give it like a 9 as well too. It's really really well made as far as just having so many new ideas, but it's also hard to see in context of appreciate really like how groundbreaking it was on many levels. But you can see why this skyrocketed Schwarzenegger, you know what I mean? And James Cameron. But I do love that it is such a different flavor than the sequel as well. Yeah. Because the sequel is the one I've watched the most. This one I've pretty much seen on TV. I've never sat down to watch like a disc copy or streaming copy before that I remember. I probably rented it or something, but again, the second one was just way more attractive. But there's a whole lot to appreciate about this, and I love the world building and the way they dole out information. I think it's just so well paced to that first half of the film. Really, not all the effects hold up or whatever, but yeah, I give it a 9. I think it's obviously vastly important too as far as sci-fi action films go.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll go along that lines too and give like a 9 because it's a movie that's very important, that was very influential, still is enjoyable on its own right. And you think about movies that had like a big influence on filmmaking and things like that. I mean, Terminator is a movie that at least had its due in theaters and sequels and stuff. Like Blade Runner was a movie that at the time it came out was kind of a flop and became more, impactful over time due to its influence on people who made stuff in the wake of it and things like that, as opposed to Terminator, at least, was popular in the time and influential and successful and got, it wasn't a black mark in anyone's, career. It was actually like, I think that was a huge jumping off launching point for everybody. Yeah. And it just created, but I do think, like you pointed out, I didn't even think about the parallels of like Ripley's just a normal woman who's working a job that has to then become the hero. In this movie, Sarah
against
Connor
this seemingly unstoppable force, which is
just an everyday woman who has to kind of rise to the occasion against this unstoppable force. So these kind of cool parallels. Yeah, so it's a very important movie, one that I enjoy. I need to get like a good high. I don't know if they have like the UHD Blu-ray, but like a good copy.
Yeah, the Netflix one is fine, but it's not.
It was Amazon,
the best. Netflix is where I watched it.
Oh. It might be on a few services. I think it's on
Netflix. Well, it's funny because
they go in waves where stuff's available on everything.
Well, it was on Amazon, and it suggested Wayne's World after, so that's why I watched
it. My Terminator 2 copy too is a DVD, but I bought it probably around the time this was coming out. But it's funny because it's a DVD, but it's marketing all over about this is a high definition transfer. It must have been like one of the early. Of course, Cameron probably helped produce this, but I guess it was mastered from like a high HD file onto DVD because it was like probably 2 years before Blu-rays even came out.
Is it yeah, so Terminator is also on Netflix. So was that the one where the cover was like the metallic?
This one you
So
had.
I had that too. I think it had like a disc that has an HD version you can play on the computer.
It does, and I tried to play that a while back.
Doesn't work.
I could not get it to work on modern systems. Yeah, it does, and that was so cool because at the time I probably didn't care.
Yes,
because I didn't have an HD computer monitor either.
So back then that was doing like a high def scan of the film transfer probably, or like the film. and giving you like the highest quality DVD.
Which they do that now with 4K. That's what kind of drives me crazy sometimes, because they do marketing. And it's like, oh, this is the 4K transfer of Suspiria, only available on Blu-ray. It's like, there's a European version that's actually on a 4K disc, but it's like, you've done the work. Can you please just put it on a 4K disc? That's the players aren't rare now.
It's because they want to make you buy it 3 times.
I know, yeah. It's like, quit marketing like, oh my God, we have it from a 4K scan. You can say we, mastered it from, I don't know, it's frustrating.
It's more of like, oh, you can buy this. I'm the type of person, like, if I buy it on DVD or Blu-ray, whatever I buy, that's what I'm buying it on. I'm not buying another copy. I just bought my one copy, and I'll deal with the quality from there.
Yeah, but that'll wrap up our discussion of The Terminator, the 1984 classic from James Cameron with Arnold Schwarzenegger, Linda Hamilton.
Let us know which one you like the best.
Not Sean Bean, Michael Bean. Although Michael Bean and Sean Bean do both die in a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that wrap up our discussion of Terminator. So like you said, if you have strong thoughts on that franchise, especially anybody that's like a huge fan of the post T2 movies, I'm interested to hear that. I know every movie has its defenders and fans. I just don't know anybody who's like a Terminator Salvation apologist. At least I haven't ran across that yet. But yeah, so if you're listening via iTunes, do us a huge favor and leave a review. That helps other people find the podcast. We always enjoy seeing comments and feedback on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube, because we do get some good comments on YouTube sometimes. So I always enjoy seeing that. You can find all the stuff we're doing at housebyvideostore.com. Find links to all of our social media accounts, to Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all that stuff. And if you want to find us specifically on the internet, I am on Instagram at the William Caps.
You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at MetaWorldDerek.
And I'm at Blevins Sean on Twitter.
And that'll wrap up this episode of the House by Video Store podcast. Thanks for listening.
House by the Video